then maybe you'll find a different kind of belief there, like, no, I'm the greatest or whatever it is. But typically, those kinds of arrogances are based on some kind of a lack belief at this level. So usually, as humans, we come back to like, no, my belief system is not that great. I got some work to do there. So if you tune into that background feeling of like, what is that belief? What does a belief look like? How can I perceive a belief? It's not going to show up as a thought or as a word, not in the typical sense. It's not going to show up as a sentence. Now, if I deduce a sentence, for instance, oh, I think it's, I am unworthy. You know, when you have a healing session, someone asks you, probably someone in this community, you know, what must you believe is true in order to feel this way? And you go sit with it and you kind of don't want to because it's not the funnest thing. You just want to, you can't wait to go out there and prove this wrong, right? So it's kind of boring to have to go there when there's so much here that you could do to prove your worth. So it's like, yeah, I'd rather not look at not being worthy. I'm kind of eager and antsy. And look, there's people around. Why would I do this now? That's not going to help me, be great. It's not going to help me be worthy. They're going to think I'm a loser even more. Why would I go spend time here and like fucking loser? So I'd rather go out and show my worth and prove my worth and demonstrate my worth and extract it from the world. Or I might change some thoughts or words. So maybe I discover, okay, I think my belief is I'm unworthy. So I'm going to, stand in a mirror. I'm going to say, I'm worthy. I'm worthy. I am thin. I am fit. I'm beautiful. And it will be able to leak through. But what you often notice is that there's a contradictory energy present when you do that. When you start confirming something that you don't really believe using the subtle body, it can have an effect. It does open a gateway. It does make a connection. It does begin to plant new seeds, but it's a bit of a slow process. And typically there is some resistance to what you're saying. Let's say you're obese and you look in the mirror and you say, I'm thin. I'm thin. I'm thin. You need a lot of imagination power to kind of override what you're seeing here, the harvest or the end result, right? So because of that, because you have to believe that maybe you're unworthy or that maybe you're obese or whatever it is, or you're not well or whatever negative belief you have. But let's use the example of being overweight and looking in the mirror and saying, I'm thin, or I'm slender or whatever. Then you're going to probably feel, or you could say, okay, I'm loved. But if you have a belief here that is, I'm not loved, then you're going to feel that resistance when you try affirmations or when you try to imagine your ideal reality. You're going to find some resistance. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So that's because this one is deeper than that. So you can change that and have a positive effect to some degree. But the real magic happens at the causal level. You're familiar with what reasoning looks like. You're familiar with what energy feels like. You're familiar with language, with words. You're familiar with imagining the astral senses and being some other place. But what most people are not very familiar with is the causal level of their own consciousness or mind. Often we call this the unconscious in modern psychology. It's the seed level. So this is typically where the I'm unworthy or I'm unloved has its seed, has its root. Now, how are you going to then know that you're working at that level? There's sort of a threshold here. And you could say that threshold exists, similar threshold exists between all the levels, but it's a threshold where you take your attention from outward looking to inward looking, to kind of behind you looking. And for most people, especially you guys, these two will be experienced as being in front of you. Right? Oh, I see my thoughts. I see my emotions. I see my feelings. I see my physical body. I see my world. But I don't think that for most of you guys, the causal body is in front of you. It's not even always in front of me because I'm interacting quite a bit with the world and the senses and all that stuff. So I have to switch that too if I'm doing intentional work at this level. Not always, but for the most part. So the causal body can be experienced as being behind your thoughts and feelings and energy sensations and imagination. So, but that's kind of where perception as you know it ends. There's no light, there's no shape, there's no form, there's no symbol, there's no words. So how are you going to recognize that? It's initially going to feel just like an empty black blank, like a sleep state. Peaceful, quite peaceful if you're just using it as a meditative state and you're not doing any specific work. But now we're trying to do specific work at that level. So then what are you looking for in that space? And by the way, the power by which you know any of these levels is awareness. It's just become identified with these levels. So it's kind of like that's where you feel like you are. But you're always here. And you're always, everything is enabled by this. So even the causal body can be perceived because the great causal body, the light of awareness, enables perception and understanding of the causal level, even though it doesn't have words and thoughts and symbols and visuals. So then that's why this is so different here. You know, world, body, relationship, thoughts, feelings, imagination, you're familiar with that, but then feels like empty nebula of psychic atomic energy is a little different. But one way, it's just one way of describing it. But let's say that I go to the causal level and I try to feel into something that I haven't seen yet. Like, what am I not seeing about what I am assuming right now? Sometimes maybe something here happens that seems challenging or weird or like not negative, not positive initially. I can give it a positive interpretation, but it seems maybe negative or there is a negative interpretation. Then I would try to trace that back to, okay, what must I believe about myself for this to be reflected in that way or for me to interpret it in that way? Because oftentimes what we think is a negative event is actually just part of the bridge of incidents that gets us to what we've been requesting all this time. If I've been requesting a better job, my boss might fire me. If I then go judge that negatively, I'm missing the fact that actually it's on its way to a better job, better life. Everything I've been asking for is coming my way. But at the first sign of distress or like lack, we start judging it from a lack place, and then we kind of stop the sprouting process. We stop nurturing the sprouting of that new intention. So oftentimes, well, I would say always, everything that happens is a reflection. But when you're working with this consciously, you're setting new intentions, then everything that happens in your life should be seen as part of the bridge of incidents that gets you to where you want to go. Doesn't mean that some of these don't reflect a personality trait or a conviction that is worth looking at. In fact, they do. But it's all a reflection of this. So then, if I were to go look for that, okay, what must I believe about myself? What am I assuming? Where am I coming from unconsciously that is producing this? If I allow my consciousness to go to that level, kind of sort of exit the thinking mind, the symbols, and just stay quietly attuned to my desire to find, to sense what I believe, then one of the ways that it typically occurs to me is kind of like an invisible, empty, almost like subatomic or molecular sort of cloud structure. It doesn't look that way. It doesn't really have a visual, but it kind of feels like a nebula, like a mist, like a structure made out of emptiness, existing in emptiness, like empty vibration inside of space. Kind of feels like that, like an empty nebula of psychic atomic energy. It's kind of what it feels like. So that's what you're working with, and it doesn't have the typical symbols. Now, you might get symbols and thoughts doing this work or memories, but that's the subtle body reacting or maybe helping you a little bit, give you more clarity on where to look for the root, how to tune into that core frequency. If this is the song, then this is the vibration of the radio station. Now, if you were to just tune into the vibration of your favorite radio station, you wouldn't perceive music. You need speakers for that, just the subtle body. You wouldn't perceive the music. But you could perceive the waves that produce this music. So they kind of indicate each other. But the causal level, you just don't typically have the senses for that. So it requires some concentration, some subtle work. But if you can lock onto the core frequency of an assumption of you, where the I am became I am this, or where the I am became I am unlovable, or where the I am became I'm an asshole, or where the I am became I'm unlucky, or where the I am became I'm lucky, could be positive again, then you can sense into this invisible, empty cloud of atomic psychic energy in the back of that vastness, through which the light of God shines, gets rerouted, refracted, distorted, and then produces emotions in your state of being and in your thoughts because it's out of alignment with the pure, undiluted light of God that shines through. But when the light of God, or the I am, hits the causal body, it has to go through your filters in order to produce an experience that you could say belongs to your individuation of the Creator.